So we are live right now. And good evening, friends. So happy to be live back with yet another episode of Poorna Wellbeing Samvada. And this time, very interesting topic. The topic is reclaiming power by finding resources within. And who better than inviting Ashwini for this? To me, Ashwini really embodies power. And so I wholeheartedly welcome Ashwini to this session, to this Samvada. Thank you so much for agreeing to be with us and sharing your thoughts with our audience.
I must say, Deepa ma'am, since the day you told me that you're inviting for me to share my thoughts on this topic, I think it must have been like 10 days ago, no? It's really been such an important, reflection topic itself. And I must
Yes.
thank you for the opportunity because, it creates that space within you to reflect on a theme.
Yes.
That
Yes.
you're using power, but then reflecting on it means so much. So,
Yes.
thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Ashwini is one of those individuals with so much humility. She is the founder director of Mukta Foundation, which is an organization committed to prevent interpersonal abuse and promote mental health. So many students know her because she was earlier a faculty member in postgraduate department of psychological counseling, psychology at Montfort College and Jain University, Bangalore. She is a counseling psychologist with practice and research interest in the area of intervention and prevention of interpersonal violence. And I remember last year around this time is when we had invited her for one such conversation on Poorna Wellbeing page. And at that time, she had mentioned to me that she had just returned. She directed a campaign titled Child Safety National Priority, where she traveled non-stop for 90 days from January 1st to April 1st, and to 29 states and 3 union territories to cover about 150 plus training sessions on prevention of child sexual abuse, thereby becoming the first person to have done this in this entire country, which makes it, we can understand what must be her inner space from where she comes from and how powerful this being is. And salute to you, Ashwini, to your humility, to your power, to all that you bring to this session and to the world actually.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
So, without wasting any time, let's dive into the topic. Now, power, the word itself is so powerful, and yet we know that there is often a negative connotation with this word. There's this concept of a feeling of power over. But when I'm referring to power, and when I thought of this topic, I was referring to the personal power. This is this which something that's already there within us, something that is feels liberating, which feels very freeing, where the locus of control is really coming from inside, from within. And this comes, I've realized, from security of who we are. It comes from a security of our knowing that who we are in our core. How would you describe power?
Sure. Ever since you mentioned about the topic, Deepa ma'am, I've been thinking about, all the concepts that I relate with power. And, two things actually kept coming as ideas related to power or what I see as synonyms for, the power.
Yeah.
The first
Yeah.
thing was actually locus of control. It's also
Yes.
something that you,
Yeah.
described while introducing the topic, internal locus of control.
Yes.
See, but
That's
what
correct.
I mean by internal locus of control is that attitude, that belief within oneself that I can
Yes.
determine my life,
Yeah.
the course
Yes.
of my life. But
Yes.
something else kept coming, which is
Yes.
apart from internal locus of control, also the ability to respond.
Mm.
The reason why I'm, sharing this as another concept is because, see, in
Mm.
internal locus of control, the idea is I'm going to determine the course of my life. But
Yes.
with that ability to respond, what happens is, let's say, when life happens, and sometimes
Yes.
mostly life
Yes.
happens, in ways that
Yes.
we don't predict.
Yes,
Despite
absolutely.
despite the belief in internal locus of control and having the
Yeah.
skills also, when
Yes.
things go unpredictable,
Yes.
power is to still believe that I still have the freedom to respond to this,
Yes.
the surprise that life has thrown in the manner that I want to, in the manner
Yes.
that I can still determine. So, therefore,
Yes.
personal power to me is, of course, freedom. Freedom
Yes.
to determine life the way I
Yes.
want to, of course, without violating the rights of others. But when
Yes.
I'm unable to determine, I still
Yes.
use the same freedom to respond to life. It still creates that peace within me, that bliss within me.
Mm-hmm. So it's the feeling that I choose.
I
I'm
choose.
making this choice at this point in time.
Absolutely.
And then there is a kind of an alignment. You
That's
kind of agree to your
right. Yeah.
choice, and there's an
Congruence.
acceptance.
Congruence. No?
There's congruence.
So,
Exactly, exactly. And congruence is so important because I think without that, peace is completely eroded.
hmm. So true.
So
Absolutely.
true. So, absolutely. So there are two things you said. One is I having the locus of control and that I can determine my life. And second is sometimes in spite of having that, I may not I may not respond because I may not feel that I have a choice. And this feeling has got a connection with our experiences in our childhood. A lot of times our experience say that I cannot make a choice because life happens, and
Hmm.
there is no response possible. So a lot of times it happens. So because of that, there are a lot of stereotypes and a lot of myths we carry about power. You have been working in the space of prevention of child sexual abuse, so which means you're really going to that space of childhood and enabling them to recognize what is power, and also teachers, caregivers to help them see what power is. So, can you share your journey, in terms of the concepts you shared? How do you
Hmm.
see this playing out in reality?
Sure, ma'am. So, just before I speak about, my work with children, especially, I just want to, see if both of us, share the same perspective with respect to what I said regarding response. So, what I meant was internal locus of control is determining my life. But when
Yes.
I'm unable to determine my life, whatever happens in my life, power is I still respond to that circumstance in the manner that I want to. I said that's
Mm,
also power. That's
mm,
one thing. Now, with respect to the children, no, with my work with children, also maybe it parallels with me starting, Mukta Foundation. So, in fact,
yes.
if you see the meaning of the word Mukta is also liberated.
Yeah.
It's something to do with the
Yeah.
freedom
Freedom.
itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And at Mukta, we focus on prevention of all forms of interpersonal abuse. But my heart actually, I mean, if you say of all the forms of interpersonal abuse, where would you like to put your focus and energy on? It's with
Mm,
prevention of child sexual abuse. And for the
mm,
simple reason that, when you're a child, because we're
mm,
born dependent, that in
mm.
itself creates notion of power. No, we are born
Yes.
dependent and there is no denying that. So that in
Yes.
itself creates our initial ideas of who is powerful. Yeah.
Yes.
And then when violence occurs at that
Mm,
stage, somewhere power will become equivalent to control. Power will
mm.
then become equivalent to domination,
Yeah.
violence,
Over.
over, and then it has lifelong repercussions.
Yes.
Yeah. So therefore, why
Exactly.
is it so important for children to grow up in a safe environment? Is so that
Yes.
they can evolve the notions of power by the
Yeah.
experience of their life in a safe
Yes.
environment. So therefore, I think
Absolutely.
working with children becomes very important, and especially preventing violence, so that power is then not equated to domination, power over.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yes.
in fact,
Exactly.
the more and more I think about power, I think the opposite of power is violence. No. the opposite of power is violence.
Yeah.
Simply because imagine if I'm able to experience my personal power, there is
Yes.
no way I would want to dominate someone and then
Yes.
have their share of power. And
Mm.
that's what all violence is. All
Yes.
violence, the it begins with violation, and all
Yes.
violence, the ultimate goal is my power is not enough, that I want
Yes.
others' share of power. So therefore, ensuring that children don't uh, equate power with control, domination, and violence. I think work with children, preventing child sexual abuse or any dimension of abuse with respect to
Yeah.
children, I believe it's
Yeah.
so important.
Yes. Yes. And I think this is so important because directly related to what you said is parenting.
Mm, mm,
If a child grows up with this notion of power when they become parent, and I have attended one of your sessions on parenting where you talked about those animals and
ah,
related qualities, and where you talked out so beautifully about parenting. And so I see that when power becomes violence or power becomes power over, as a parent also they may tend to we tend to choose autocratic parenting, vis-a-vis the other parenting where you have conversations, which is what you
mm,
talked about is the most ideal
mm,
one.
mm,
So there is the concept or the experience of power
mm.
translates into a construct which can be really destructive to self and our children during the parenting process.
So true.
So I have really struggled with it. I mean, I thought parenting is the hardest thing. But when I looked at it, actually, it is not about the child, but it is about
Mm,
me as an individual and going
mm.
back to my childhood and looking at what is my construct of power.
So
And
true.
and and what you're saying is so true because the personal power is when there is freedom. There is a freedom to manifest my dreams and have best relationships. But when I have not experienced that kind of power, personal power, there is fear because there is fear of something over you,
Mhm.
and that makes us feel powerless.
So true.
So what is this journey of feeling? When I was born, probably I was powerful, I was taken care of, and then there's some during the in the process we become powerless, and then we rise to claim our power if we are lucky enough. So what
So
are these stages actually? Can you
true.
throw light on this?
Absolutely. I know that you like thinking figuratively, in terms of
Yeah.
images. And, because in every conversation of ours, any topic that we've discussed, we've tried to put it within an image form. Yeah. So, and I've been thinking because I know it's Deepa ma'am that I'm going to be conversing, and I'm actually thinking, how does power play out? For me,
Mm,
personal power is actually an outcome.
mm,
Personal power is an outcome of certain type of attitude,
mm,
knowledge, and skill
mm.
set. Yeah. So
Skills.
there is, the attitudes, then there is certain knowledge that we need to know theoretically, and then there are skills. And when there is, the right set of these, I derive personal power. And then
Mm,
using this personal power that I have, what do I choose to do with it? Now that is the
yes,
purpose of the life, no?
yes,
So
yes,
it's
yes.
an image wise. At the base of it is our attitude, skills, and
Mm,
knowledge.
mm,
From this comes personal power. Sometimes I can use this personal power for all the destruction of my own self
yeah,
and others, but
yeah,
I can also use it for achieving my own higher purpose and also maybe empowering others.
yeah,
So it's like
yeah.
skills, attitudes, knowledge, and then we have personal power. And what do I choose to do with that personal power? Yeah, I think that's going to determine the well being that we experience in our life. It's also
Yes,
going to determine, simply put, the quality of
yes,
one's life.
yes.
So when you're talking about the fear,
Mm,
sometimes what happens, the fear. So what I think is, let's say, as I said, the attitude, skills, and
mm.
knowledge.
Forms
Now
the base.
here is where fear has a chance. Say, for example, fear. Okay. Now, if I have the right skill set to manage my fear, then I would
Yes.
still continue to, experience that
Yeah.
personal power. But the moment I say, okay, there is fear, the moment I acknowledge fear, then I'll become powerless. That's when fear is going to dominate.
Yes.
So, all that I'm trying to say here is an aspect of personal power is to acknowledge that there are going to be moments of powerlessness.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
could be because of fear, that could be because of anger, that could be because of my, unconditional love to someone. So, an aspect of personal power is acknowledging that there are going to be moments of powerlessness, and that's because of all these emotions. The
Mm.
moment personal power would be to acknowledge I'm powerless because of this feeling, because of this thought, I'm going to manage it, and then there is going to be personal power once
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
looking at it as stages, I'm looking at it as an oscillation. I'm
Yes.
looking at
Yeah.
it as an oscillation,
Yes.
powerlessness to power. Then there are going to be moments of powerlessness, and then we're going to reclaim it once again. How quick,
Yes.
what duration it's going to take to
Yes.
oscillate, that's going to determine, how well we'll function,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
quality of.
I so agree to what you're saying, because what you're saying is power and powerlessness both are real, and it's a polarity, and we
Yeah.
all probably swing. At some point of time, we are here or there. And what I'm also hearing you saying is there needs to be a witness who who's seeing this game, who's seeing this play, acknowledging that I'm here today, I'm here, I'm there today. And then if I'm in the powerlessness zone, can I use my inner resources? As our topic is to come back into the equanimous position and restore our power. Because when we are powerless and stay there without acknowledging, our energy is out. So
Mm.
everything is out. So beautiful. I think it's a great perspective what you shared. Did I understand right? Did I paraphrase it okay?
I think so. I think so. All that I'm saying is powerlessness is real, and we
Yes.
experience powerlessness because of fear
Yes.
on a day to day
Yes.
basis, because of anxiety. But part of that personal power is acknowledging that I am
Yes.
powerless. But as
Beautiful.
you said, being witnesses to be self aware of what is the reason for that what is the reason for that powerlessness. Could be
Yes.
fear, could be anger. And then what you do is you manage it, and that's how you reclaim, the
Yeah.
power. But
Yeah.
managing it, it's easier said, but how do you manage these emotions and thoughts? That's where skills training is, no? That's
Exactly.
it.
Exactly. Because at that time when I'm gripped by fear or anger, I am raging. I mean, sometimes I can be a Bhadragali and shout,
Hmm.
and I've faced situations where I've been gripped and powerless, and I'm shouting like a mad woman to my children, and they're
Hmm.
wondering what just happened. What did I even do? I just moved the glass from here to there. And
Hmm.
it was
Hmm.
real for me. I was helpless.
Correct.
So in that moment, skills, wills, kuch yaad nahi aata. I mean, I won't remember.
Correct.
So what does one do at that time, Ashwin?
Say for example, I was talking to you about, responding, Noma.
Yes.
An aspect of the power is I choose to respond to the circumstance in a particular manner. So, the example that you gave, I'm just
Yes.
using other terms to just describe what you just said. When I'm shouting, maybe I'm more
Yes.
reactive. No, I'm
Yes.
reactive. And
Yes.
almost more often than not, when we use the word I'm reacting, it's
Hmm.
coming out in a very unconscious manner.
Yes. Exactly.
Reaction is
Yeah.
habitual.
Yes.
Reaction is automatic,
Yes.
unintentional, unconscious, which is
Yes.
all the opposite of intention. Yeah.
Yes.
The moment I say, okay, this is what my children did, fine, I'm hurt, but I'm going to react in a conscious, in a mindful manner.
Yes.
Mindful or conscious reaction is response.
Yes. That's correct.
Conscious reaction is response. So it's
Yes.
just a matter of my training. Actually, how am I training my mind to be? Am I
Yes.
am I behaving in a reactive mode, or am I behaving in a responsive mode? Am I
True.
behaving in an automatic way, in a habitual, in an unconscious manner, or am I
Yes.
going to choose to respond in this particular manner? So it
Exactly.
boils down to intentional behavior.
Yes.
Intentionally when I react, that is going to be my response. Instead of
Absolutely.
screaming
Beautiful.
and yelling, I can say, imagine you're my child. I can say, Deepa, what you did made me so angry, and I want you to know it hurt me. This is better than saying, Deepa, the way you do now, you know. So instead of reacting, can I
Yeah.
respond through words? I know it's easier said than
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Then it's
Yes.
a matter of
Yes.
training and training and training.
Yeah.
When I'm using the word training, I'm
Yeah.
only looking at habit formation. I'm only looking
Yes.
at habit formation, which
Yes.
will then become your skill.
Yes.
So,
Exactly.
I mean, one line that I particularly have admired is what starts off as a conscious behavior. Over a period of time, it will become our personality.
Yes.
You
Exactly.
know, I
Yeah.
put in efforts to behave in this manner. It's still behavior. It's conscious efforts. But there will come a point in time when it's my second nature. It's who I am.
Yes.
What I
Yes.
do
Yes.
is
Yes.
who you become.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Yeah, I have realized that, and what I have realized is, and you beautifully said, my habitual response was to shout back because that's what I learned as parenting or reprimanding. And
mm,
when I had to change, I had to say, this is not my choice.
mm,
And then I had to say, okay, then what is my choice? Because I don't
mm,
know. Then I had to learn it. So what you're saying is to convert a habitual response into my choice means I have responded, which is what you talked about. And that's when the power is with me.
mm,
Beautiful. I think now, what you said is totally tying up with what, as an example, it makes sense. Beautiful.
sure.
So, we've also seen that in India, or maybe everywhere, there are these stereotypes.
Mm,
When we talk about power and with respect to women. So there are cultural stereotypes about women power on
mm.
one hand, and on the other hand, I see there are a lot of women liberation movements who talk about claiming their power. What's really going on there? What is conscious? What is unconscious? If you were to look at what's happening beneath the surface, what's really happening?
I mean, in terms of movements, no, that have happened, especially
Yes,
with respect to women empowerment, they usually talk about it that there have been four dominant movements. But when you look at each one of those, the movements, it all boils down to saying, I want equal rights, I
yes,
want equal opportunities. Ultimately, we are all, maybe all those movements were all about claiming different aspects of freedom. But freedom
yes.
is all that women were fighting for, and we are still fighting for. Yeah, it's
Mm,
sad that
mm,
one has to fight for, but then ultimately, what's happening is that freedom, right? Freedom
mm.
to have a vision for our life, freedom to learn the skills to build that life and to live that life, guilt free, and then to be peaceful with the choices that we've made. Hmm? So, I mean, sometimes women, freedom, but ultimately it's a human need. Instead of
Yes,
looking at all these movements as,
yes,
a woman's
exactly.
need for, but ultimately it's the human craving for, the freedom. And
Yes.
freedoms, of course, at various levels. Yeah.
Mm,
The way I look at, the freedom is this way, ma'am, and it's, um, when I was thinking about why did I name, my foundation as Mukta, which is
mm,
liberated freedom. And the motto of Mukta Foundation is for liberation between us,
mm,
for liberation within us, and
mm.
ultimately liberation of us. Yeah? So
Of us.
liberation. of us. Now, that's not a dimension that we are currently focusing on, because
Yeah.
then we will enter into the realms
Yeah.
of, the spiritual and
Yeah.
transpersonal aspect of
Yeah.
life. But that's my personal motto. But
Yeah.
then what
Yeah.
the world sees of Mukta Foundation is
Me
liberation
too.
between us and within
Yes.
us. What does that
Yes.
mean? For liberation between us is we all need interpersonal freedom. We
Yes.
all need interpersonal freedom, and that's where prevention of abuse becomes so important.
Yes. Yes.
A
Yes.
child who's born dependent, if at that stage the child is abused, what
Yes.
liberation are we talking about? So,
Exactly.
liberation between us is that interpersonal, that space of interpersonal the wellness. And liberation within us would be that mental health, promotion of mental
Yes.
well being.
Yes. Yeah.
So I see that these two have always been the basic prerequisites. All the
Yes.
movements have been about wanting that violence free environment, wanting, let's say the first, they say it was all about voting rights, and then legal rights, and then the movements focused on every aspect of day to day life. Can I choose my career? Can I choose my education? And then it was, once again, we are talking about, prevention of sexual harassment in all these, the movements where women have spoken about empowering themselves. They've demanded for freedom. So
Hmm.
I think this journey has always been about wanting that interpersonal freedom and then
Yes.
intrapersonal freedom. And then it's also cyclical. Sometimes you
Yes.
can have interpersonal freedom and you found that intrapersonal freedom.
Yeah.
But sometimes
Yeah.
you want interpersonal freedom to find that, then it becomes, very cyclical. So
Yeah.
if you ask me what's happening or what's happened in these movements, it's just women wanting human freedom.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. Yeah.
Instead of
Yeah.
saying those were women wanting freedom, I think we should say it's women wanting human craving for freedom.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Women's
Exactly.
need for freedom, I don't know. What's that? Women don't have any more need for freedom than any other human being has had.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
women
Yeah.
wanting human freedom. That's it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting as you say that we were free, then we became bound, and now we're wanting to claim that back. So it's a very interesting movement, no? From uh, expansion to contraction to once again expanding to meet ourselves in our fullest self. Again, it's an image, Ashwini. I can't help
No, no,
sharing
no. That's so beautiful.
Yeah, but very interesting. So when you're talking about Mukta Foundation and the basics, it's not true just for women. It can be even a male child, isn't it?
Beautiful. So true.
I mean,
It's
it's
wanting that freedom in the interpersonal space and then wanting that freedom with it. That's where wanting to prevent abuse comes, and that's where wanting to promote mental wellness comes.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
when it comes to interpersonal, I see a play of boundaries as well. Yeah,
True. Correct.
to be able to define my boundaries and to be saying no, this is not okay.
Mm.
I
Mm.
mean, there's such a play there also, on
So,
of boundaries.
mm. So there
Beautiful.
cannot be power, no? Say, for example, boundary. Usually they look at boundary using three ideas. What's the type
Mm,
of boundary that we have set? The first type of boundary is a very, what do you say, diffused boundary. You know
mm,
what does diffused boundary means? That between two people, there's really no boundary. It's so diffused that they are in an enmeshed relationship.
yeah,
Like say,
yeah,
for instance, growing up, I had this, which was my dad's feelings would I would
yeah,
take over his feelings. He is
yeah,
sad. For me, love was I too should feel sad.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's like my mom is sad. That means I would feel great deal of guilt to feel anything but that.
Yeah,
So this
yeah,
is a classic indication of how boundaries are so diffused.
yeah,
Boundaries are so diffused that you know two people have become so enmeshed. That's
yeah,
one. And then we have the extreme opposite of disengagement. where the boundaries are so rigid that it doesn't really matter, what the other person is, going through, and I remain untouched. That's disengagement where there is rigid boundary. But the fact that we're all in interpersonal relationship, and that's essential for our survival, our thriving, the ideal is, can our boundaries be permeable? Can our
Yeah.
boundaries be permeable? What is that permeability? They say, the cells are permeable. I'm just suddenly the image of my biology teacher came, my 8th standard. Permeable boundaries is, I let what is important, and I choose to not let something
Yeah.
else affect me. In that
Yes.
way, I can be there for myself. And because I've retained my energies, I can also be there for somebody else. So when we
Yes.
are looking at boundaries, I think a great deal of personal power is
Yes.
also in being aware of what's the kind of boundary that I
Yeah.
share with this person, with that
Yes.
person. Sometimes it's
Exactly.
quite possible. I feel, sometimes it's quite possible that I might share a very diffused boundary with one person in my
Yeah.
life, but completely disengaged with another.
Yeah.
There are some in the name of balancing, no, in the name of balancing our energies. Sometimes what we do is get enmeshed with some, get
Yeah.
disengaged with another, but that's not the way to balance. It will
Yes.
lead to disharmonious relationship with all
Absolutely.
parties. So
Absolutely.
instead, as much as possible, with every relation, with every relationship, maybe in your personal life, professional life, can there be a permeable boundary
Hmm.
which is healthy? And even research says, and personally each one of us might have experienced, a permeable boundary between you and the other person, not enmeshed, not rigid, is likely to give that personal power which is good for you and the other person.
Absolutely. I so agree. It's my own personal example that I used to be an enmeshed. I used to have diffuse boundaries. From there, I went to rigid, and now
Mm.
I know with whom and what kind of a permeable boundary. And I feel it keeps me safe. More
Mm.
than anything, it keeps me safe. I don't erode my power and my energy, and I think it's peaceful. I can sleep in peace. But it's a hard thing, It's taken me 43 years probably to come here. It is easier said than done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so true. So you had shared, Ashwini, that we can learn the skills to to reclaim our power. You talked about uh, acknowledging, and then having the skills to really make choices and to respond in a way. So can we get there and see how can we feel? How can we do that? What are some of the tips, steps we can do in our daily life?
To retain that personal power, ma'am? Is that
Yeah.
what you're saying?
First of all, acknowledging, like in that moment, in the heat of the moment, how do I really bring my witness and acknowledge? And after
Mhm.
I acknowledge, then how, is acknowledgement enough? Do I need to do something else? What are some of the things I can do?
Sure. Um, for instance, even in the domain of counseling and psychotherapy, there have been various schools of thought. There's been various schools of thought. But of late, especially the last 2 to 3 years, of all the schools of thought, there is this one school of thought which I'm really drawn to. Say, for example, there's one school that speaks about, when there is a problem, the person has the problem. Imagine if
Hmm.
I am in trouble, that means I have a problem. That was how the first school of thoughts about counseling emerged.
Hmm.
Deepama, I'm giving a round about the response, but I really hope I would be able to communicate it in a
Yes, yes, we are with
comprehensive
you.
manner as to what I'm intending to. So the first school of thought is talking about, I have a problem. Then
Hmm.
came the notion of, for an individual to develop any concerns. The
Mm.
relationships, maybe there are concerns. The
Mm.
relationships, there is a problem. But
Mm.
I'm awfully drawn to this particular notion of it's not I or the relationship. Instead,
Mm.
what are the stories we tell about our
Yeah.
own life? What are the
Absolutely.
stories that we talk, share with others? That's where
Yeah.
narratives, no narratives.
Yeah.
So it's if anything is disordered, it's the narratives,
It's the
the
narrative.
language.
So
You know,
true. So true.
so it's not
Yeah.
I who has problem. It's not the relationship which has problem. Instead, maybe I'm telling a story that's not helping me, and I can
Yeah. And the
restore
narrative
it.
sometimes may not be real. Also, it's there in our
So
head, and we've played it
yeah.
again and again.
Yeah. So now I'm using this idea of what do we tell ourselves to build my
Yes.
point. Yeah.
Yes.
I read this somewhere. And it stayed with me for quite some time now, which is we all talk about resources. No? Say, for
Mm.
example, when you asked, what can we do to
Mm.
uh, have that power? Is it just enough to acknowledge the lack of it? That's one thing. But ultimately, what we are telling is what are our resources to create that power, retain that power, and to use that power in a
Use
more
it.
meaningful
Yes.
manner.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
so create power, retain the power, and use the power to meet our purpose and
Yes.
whatever be
Correct.
that purpose is. What we need is the resources. What we need is the resources. But I have something to tell about the very concept of resource. Say, for example, uh, imagine I have this pen, and I
Okay.
lose, because sometimes we talk about find resource. Now the idea is, if I know I have this pen and then I lose it, I can find it.
Hmm.
If I know that I had this pen and then I lose it, I can find it. But when I've not had a pen, I cannot find it. Instead, I need to create it. So,
Hmm.
therefore, first and foremost is to distinguish, should I find a resource that I have, or should I create a resource?
Hmm. Hmm.
Sometimes we spend a lot of time trying to find something that we don't have,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
So then time to create that resource than looking
Yes.
for what I already have. So first we need to distinguish, is it a matter of finding my resource or is it
Hmm.
creating a newer resource?
Hmm.
And we're going to just few tips. No, it's almost like how could we uh, create power, uh, retain that power, and use it for our larger, to meet our the purpose. I was thinking so many points, and how do I, put it across? Just before we began this conversation, I've put it in the
Hmm.
form of an acronym. I'm trying to bring in all the ideas and put it into an acronym. So in this
Wow.
45 to 1 hour of this discussion,
Yeah.
anybody who's listening could take away
Benefit.
the
Yeah.
message in a
Yeah.
succinct
Yeah.
manner.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
given the
But
acronym.
Ashwini, before you go to the tips, the point that you shared about, is very interesting. Should I find the resource or should I create the resource? Now, oftentimes I also see the energy lost in creating a resource which I already have because but I don't know I have.
Mm, mm, mm.
So, do you also see that happening?
Can happen. Why should I say, for example, when I have my own stories of strength,
Yes,
searching for newer stories of strength outside of
yes,
me, it's going to drain me.
exactly. Exactly.
So,
But if my confidence is low, I will not know that I can access my stories.
yeah.
That
So
becomes an
then,
issue, and I've often seen that even in the coaching work that I do.
mm,
That as a coach, I have to show them the mirror of how resourceful you are, but they are
mm,
finding it outside.
mm. Which is, say, for example, sometimes what would happen is, imagine I tell you that, Deepa ma'am, my strength is you. From your
Mm,
story, I derive my strength. if you as a person wants to empower me, you would
Mm.
also be interested in me to find my own stories of strength.
Exactly.
But sometimes
Exactly.
what happens, sometimes be it in mentoring, be it in coaching, counseling, when it becomes that better than
Yes, the
that our
power.
coach knows.
Yes.
The coach knows more than the coachee.
Yes.
The
That's it.
counselor knows more than the
Yes.
counselee. The teacher
Exactly.
knows more than the student. What happens
Yes.
is, it's we create a circumstance where the client, the
Yeah.
coachee, the student, or the
Yeah.
mentee, we want to derive power or our
Power.
strength from the mentor, the counselor. Now, that's not therapeutic, neither in the
Yeah.
short term nor in the long run. So, I think that's
Yeah.
where that self awareness of coaches, mentors, counselors, teachers,
True.
trainers, it's so important. It's so important to say, can we find stories in you? And how can a coach grow because of the stories of the coachee? And then we
Yes.
have that and I think narrative coaching, that's an emerging idea, no? Narrative coaching, that's the base of it. Collaborative
Yes.
collaborative these
Yes.
days. So I think we were talking about those few ideas, Nima. Maybe I'll just continue to talk about
Yes. Absolutely.
few of the ideas about on a day-to-day basis what could we do. And this is certainly, it's like, I'm not saying that it works, but I'm just recollecting stories from what I've seen working in my life, and those that I've interacted with, and I've summarized. As I said, I've come up with this acronym of peace. And I was like, actually, really, do you want to do this about acronyms? My love for acronyms is too much.
Oh,
But,
what is it? Pin? Sorry?
peace, acronym,
PINK.
PEAC, peace. How do
Peace.
you?
Peace. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have these, ideas, which you see if it comes in handy.
Yeah.
The first idea with P, you know, the first idea is psychological first aid.
Okay.
Psychological first aid.
Yeah.
You know, with this idea, what I'm trying to say here is, we feel most powerless in distress. It's almost like a pretty obvious point, no? In
Yeah.
times of distress, in times of crisis, is when we feel
Ab-
most powerless.
Yes.
Now, do we have the skills to provide psychological first aid to our own self and that of
Uh,
others? Yeah. Psychological first aid, very similar to the physical first aid. Imagine if I'm a child or a teenager and I've fallen down and there is
yeah.
a scratch here. It's
Yeah.
good that I know a bandage is what I need to apply.
Yes.
Similarly, can we equip ourselves with ideas of psychological first aid? Yeah, psychological first aid. Say, for example, I remember the first time I experienced psychological first aid in the form of positive self-talk was, I had
Mm.
lost a friend. We were on work. This is 15 years ago or something. I lost track of the time. I had lost a friend, and I was the only person with that person. I was the only one. We were out on working on a project, and unfortunately, in an accident, the person passed away. And
Mm.
my parents weren't there. That person's parents I had to call, and I must have been what, like 18 or 19.
Mm.
And I remember reading somewhere, God knows where, I had read, and in that moment of extreme pain, because we were out on some project, and on the way back home, the person was no more.
Mm.
It's like completely overwhelmed and shocked. And in that
Mm.
moment, I remember telling certain soothing things to myself.
Mm.
Telling
Mm.
certain soothing things. Back then, I imagined if my mom was there, what would
Mm.
she have told me? And I'm
Mm.
talking about almost like a decade and a half ago, where cell phones weren't there. Something like this
Yeah.
happens, and then We couldn't call immediately. And it was also in a tribal area. It was also in, uh, I would
Interior.
say, wilderness, actually. It's almost like a forest area. I had to
Okay.
almost travel like, 2 kilometers or something to just have an access to phone. But in that moment, something that I had read somewhere about talking loudly to myself, talking absolutely loudly to myself, in a way that imagining my mother would have talked to me, that kind of really, helped me cope and then manage the scenario in a manner that was best in that moment. So what I'm trying to tell here is that's an example of psychological
Yes.
first aid. Back then,
Beautiful
I had
example.
no idea of the concept psychological first aid. I must have been in my second year of degree or something. But just that positive, soothing self-talk, helped a great way. Helped a great way. So we should all come up with our own unique ideas of psychological first aid. For instance, this is an extreme case of shock, trauma. Yeah, it's something on a day-to-day basis. I had this supervisor by name Poorna, and she was also my classmate. But in one such session, she told me about how stress, no, daily hundreds of things to do, and we all make to do list. And the last few years, one practice that has really helped me is I'll make to-do list. I'll make to-do list of this, that, and hundreds of things. But right next to the to-do list, I also make to-be list. To-be list. Yeah. So, for
Lovely.
example, it's like corrections. As a faculty, as much as I love reading assignments where each student is giving a newer perspective. That's lovely. But these one markers, two markers, wherein every answer is the same. It's. So that to do, you must get it done. But when you're getting that work done, what would you
Mm.
choose to be?
Yes.
I choose to
From
be
what's your inner space from where you are doing?
absolutely. So, because I mean, looking at how life is, work will get done. But
You,
when you are
you
getting that
thank
work
God.
done, in that process of getting that work done, what were you? What were you
Yeah.
being?
Who you being?
Yeah, what were you being? So some ideas of psychological first aid. An absolute, the must. That's the P, psychological first aid. And I know I'm taking time, but I hope to, summarize it. P is
Yeah, yeah.
psychological first aid. E, I'm looking at being an eternal seeker, eternal learner. You can
Yes.
only be powerful, you can retain that personal power only when we are in a in that mind space wherein you can be an eternal seeker. So every day, are you learning a new skill, or are you
Mm.
evaluating if the older skill is good enough? Say, for example, for me, I I was about to say I am technologically challenged, but then I corrected because I was technologically challenged, and on a daily basis I'm learning. I remember
Yeah.
all the work of Mukta was on the field. When the
Mm.
COVID crisis happened, the work was on the field. And I used to be somebody, whenever people asked online programs, I'm like, no, 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 no. We need to see people, only then can you gain
Yeah.
energy. All of those. And then
I
when
know.
COVID crisis hit, I think from March 18th till April 8th,
It was a
playing on a
shock. Huh?
playing on a victim mode.
Arey,
And
I
then,
put a pause.
the pause, nothing doing. And then something
We say
clicked.
fight, flies, or flight or freeze. Probably it was a freeze
Yeah,
response.
complete freeze response. And the moment it clicked that, okay, you don't know, you better learn. That's a journey from powerlessness to power. Otherwise it's like handicapped. uh, done forever, what would
Yeah.
happen? And now
Finished.
finished. And online interaction, I mean, we were doing few programs and now the world is our audience.
Correct.
So the
Correct.
moment, I mean, I just gave this example because,
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah,
we create circumstances to say I'm handicapped,
yeah,
technologically, that, this, yeah.
yeah.
But the moment we say, I'm going to be an eternal learner, I think powerlessness to power. So P is
Totally,
psychological first aid, E
totally agree.
is eternal, the seeker, the learner, yeah. And A, I know this is, Deepa ma'am's and my favorite topic, assertiveness. A is assertiveness, which is exactly, what we discussed about boundaries. No, my way
Absolutely.
of looking at assertiveness is this: that it's a continuum. There is submissiveness.
Correct.
The opposite of submissiveness is aggression, and somewhere where it should be, there is assertiveness. And the
Yeah.
definition is, sometimes it really hurts me so much. Every time I've tried to make a PPT on assertiveness and I'm searching for pictures and I Google assertiveness, all pictures are this one hand like this and no is written here. Now, that's a very superficial
Yeah.
definition of assertiveness.
Yeah.
For me, assertiveness is, do I know how to live my life without violating others' rights? And do I know how to defend my rights when others are trying to violate mine? Yeah.
Mm.
So, to that degree, submissiveness would be what? Obviously, individuals who are submissive won't violate others' rights. They won't
Mm.
violate others' rights. But when others are violating their rights,
They
they
won't
don't know
stop.
how to
Yeah. Yeah.
defend it. That
Yeah.
is
Absolutely.
submissive. And then the other opposite of aggression, what happens in aggressiveness? They violate others' rights. But do individuals who are aggressive let others violate theirs?
No way.
They don't let others violate theirs. But to be assertive, I think one personal power that we must work on is building our skills of assertiveness. Your own
Mm.
definitions, each one of us have our own ways to define assertiveness, but empathetic of assertiveness. No, it's not just to say no, to simply say no. It's okay to say yes, but I'm
Yeah.
choosing to say
Yeah.
no, yes, when I want to. So assertiveness
Exactly.
is, I do not violate others' rights, and at the same time, I do not let others violate mine.
Mine.
So peace
Ashwini, here
means,
again, it's
yeah,
very important to see what inner space I'm coming from. I
absolutely.
may sometimes false agree. I may say no, but inside I'm actually my energy is different. So it's the
Correct.
energy behind what we say and not what we say in absolute is what I wanted to just add.
Absolutely, ma'am. So an assertive individual is somebody who's well aware of his or her own
Yes.
thoughts
He knows the
and
ground. Yeah.
knows the ground upon which this S is coming
They
from,
stand.
knows the
Exactly.
ground upon which this no is coming from. Also know that my no can become yes and my yes can become
Yes.
no, and would give that
Yes.
opportunity for that change to happen.
Yes. And
Yeah,
there is assurance. There's no insecurity.
absolutely. Telling no and then feeling guilty about it,
Yeah.
or
That's
telling
what.
yes and absolutely regretting telling that,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
certainly a way
Yeah.
to
Erodes
give up
power.
on power. Absolutely. So
Absolutely right.
assertiveness is, you tell no, yes, or whatever it is, but it's coming from a place of honesty and authenticity. No?
Yes. Exactly.
That's assertiveness. So P is psychological first aid. E is, what was E? I think I talked about. I
Learner.
forgot the
Being a
word.
learner.
Eternal
Being a
learner.
learner.
And A is assertiveness. And C, I'm talking about cognitive distortions. These are
Mm.
errors in our thinking style. No, errors in our thinking style.
Yeah.
Say, for example, I was just talking to my family members, over what is power to you and all that.
Okay.
In certain conversations, it was as if for some, power was you want to be superior. You
Yeah, yeah,
see the distorted ways of the thinking.
yeah,
Power is control, power is domination. So being aware of the errors in our thinking, cognitive distortions is the errors in our thinking. Now that in itself is another topic. There are so many types of cognitive the distortion, but one way to work on our power is to first detect our cognitive distortion, detect our cognitive distortions, then debate whether the thoughts I'm holding, is it working for me or not working for me. I'm not at all using the word, is it right or wrong? No. Instead, is it working for you? Not working for you.
yeah,
Debate, then decide, and then you delete it if at all that
yeah.
thought that you're carrying is not working for you, then dump it, delete it, discard it, destroy it. Some 4D formula you use it. Yeah. Detect, debate, detect your thoughts, debate your thoughts. Let nobody else determine that's a right thought, wrong thought. There is nothing right or wrong as long as it's not violating others' boundaries and your own, the rights. Decide, delete. C is cognitive distortion. Yeah. And E, I mean, I think we also discussed this, but I want to emphasize E is embracing powerlessness.
Yeah.
Embracing powerlessness. Why? Because they say, no, what you resist will persist. You resist your fear, you resist the pain, it's going to persist. The moment I embrace that which is making me powerless, for all that which came will also know how to go. The fear which came will also know how to go. If it's not going, then I need to train myself in certain skills to make it go.
Yes,
But just to simplify, I think embracing powerlessness is the first step to gain skills to let it go.
yes,
So this
yes.
is few ideas on creating, sustaining, and using power in a meaningful manner. Peace.
And I so agree with what you're saying. As you said, there was a client who I'm working with who came to my mind, and one of the live sessions she attended, then she reached out to me and she told me that I think it was on guilt or some, I don't remember which one. After that, she told me that I think I'm tired of being in the same rut of feeling small. I recognize I'm powerless. Now I want to work on it. Can you help me? And we've started a journey. So sometimes recognizing powerlessness and surrendering to it and saying, but I want to shift and acknowledging it and wanting that, desiring to move forward is power itself. So,
Absolutely.
I think it's powerful. What you said is very, very powerful.
Thank you,
So
madam.
yeah, thank you so much for this point. So I think it's so beautifully put, peace acronym of how we can get, and simple things that we can do to acknowledge and overcome our powerlessness. And I think once you acknowledge it and then you commit to it and set an intention, then I think the answers to what needs to be done will flow. And if it doesn't flow to us, we can reach out to people who can help us with it. There are so many of us who people can reach out to help. But not staying in that state is like the first thing. If it doesn't work for you. So what you said is delete, dump, and all of that. I think that makes a lot of sense. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
So, and sorry, you're saying something.
No, I wasn't.
Okay. So, I mean, I think with this, I would definitely like to bring it to a close, but I think, is there any last words that you would like to share to all of us who so much seek to be in our power and who are yearning, to get there?
Um, those of us who've been in academics know that elaboration is such a, I don't know, it's a skill or the lack of it. Elaborate, these last lines are so difficult, liners.
Yeah,
But
because you can.
I'm just kidding. I'm just thinking. Our title was,
Yes.
reclaiming power.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
correct.
it's actually focusing on an idea that none of us are powerless. It's just a matter of reclaiming it. Hmm?
Yes.
I'm thinking this reclaiming power is almost like reclaiming the breath, no? Like, say, for instance, in the hurry burry of things, even in this conversation, I am, you are breathing, but we can, at any given point, we can breathe with a lot more intent,
Yeah, that's correct.
with a lot more awareness,
Conscious.
with
Yeah.
consciousness, we can breathe. And I think it's the same even with power.
Yeah.
There is power, we are using it, but at any given point in time, there is certainly an opportunity to create and use power with greater awareness, with greater intentionality, and with that intentionality of creating and using power, I think we could really create a life that's meaningful and purposeful.
Excellent, beautiful. I think that's really my wish too, and that is the wish that even Poorna Wellbeing as an institution holds, because we want to spread the movement of well-being, balance, consciousness. Move from unconsciousness to consciousness, so that we can really live happy and joyous and reclaim
Yeah,
every aspect that, so to say, has moved out of us. We just have to get them back and feel
absolutely.
that integration once again. So thank you so much, Ashwini, for bringing this perspective. Very special, very beautiful. Um, then our next Samvada, which is 15 days from now, we will be focusing on boundaries, and Ashwini will be back with us because she's a champion in boundaries, and I've had conversations with her. It has been enjoyable and very practical. So we invite Ashwini back, and thank you for agreeing, Ashwini, on this beautiful, interesting session. I think it's October 7th. And we'll be back with that topic. I think yes, it's sorry, November 7th. November 7th, yeah, on boundaries. So we'll keep you informed. Thank you, Ashwini, and thank you, audience. Do share your comments. Do share. Yeah, Ashwini, Jinisha says deep gratitude. Simran says thank you so much. So thank you for being there, watching us, and do join us for other initiatives, and definitely our next live on boundaries. So we'll be back. Thank you, Ashwini.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lovely speaking to you, ma'am.
Bye.